I worked the late shift at a small convenience store on the edge of town, where the neon lights flickered and the shelves were lined with snacks, drinks, and everything in between. Most nights were quiet, just a few regulars stopping by to grab a soda or a pack of gum. But that night was different. It was just past closing time when I heard the chime of the doorbell. I glanced up from behind the counter, surprised to see a figure stepping inside. The man was tall, dressed in a tattered jacket that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. His eyes were dark and sunken, and his smile didn't reach them. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he wandered down the aisle, running his fingers along the shelves, as if searching for something specific. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. There was something off about him, something that set my instincts on high alert. After a few minutes of uneasy silence, he made his way back to the counter, still wearing that unsettling grin. "I'm just looking for a little something," he said, his voice low and raspy. "Okay," I replied, forcing a smile. "What are you in the mood for?" He leaned in closer, his breath smelling faintly of something rotten. "You wouldn't happen to have any, special items in stock, would you?" His eyes darted around the store as if checking for eavesdroppers. I raised my brow, confused. "Special items?" "Yeah, you know," he said, his grin widening, revealing teeth that were yellowed and jagged. Something that might not be on the shelves. A chill ran down my spine. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. His smile faltered for a moment, but then he leaned even closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "I heard you have some interesting things in the back. A little bird told me." Panic surged within me. I didn't know what he was talking about, but the way he looked at me made my skin crawl. "I can't help you with that," I said firmly, taking a small step back. He straightened up, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Come on, don't play games with me," he said, his tone suddenly sharp. "I know you have something. I just want to see it." "I really don't know what you're talking about," I said, my heart racing. "If you don't find what you need, I can call the police." His expression shifted, and for a brief moment I saw something menacing in his eyes. "You don't want to do that," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "It would be a shame if something happened to your little store." The threat hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "You need to leave," I said, trying to sound more assertive than I felt. He took a step back, as if considering my words, then suddenly laughed. "You're a funny one," he said, his laughter echoing off the walls. "But I'll be back. You can count on it." With that, he turned on his heel and walked toward the door, leaving me trembling behind the counter. I watched as he stepped outside, the night swallowing him whole. The door swung shut, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by unease. I locked the door and pressed my back against the counter, trying to calm my racing heart. My mind raced with thoughts of what had just happened. Had I just been threatened? What did he mean by something special? Minutes felt like hours until I finally got the courage to breathe again. I called my manager and explained the situation, but he brushed it off, saying I was just overreacting. "It's a convenience store, not a haunted house," he chuckled. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he would return. I stayed on high alert, the night stretching out in front of me like a dark tunnel. Every time the doorbell chimed, I flinched, half expecting him to walk back in with that eerie smile. It's been a little over a week now, and he hasn't come back like he said he would have. Not sure what to make of this whole thing, but if he comes back, I'll make an update post. I was driving home from a late shift, the road stretching ahead of me like a long, winding ribbon. The headlights illuminated the occasional tree or roadside sign, but most of the landscape was shrouded in mist. As I rounded a bend, I spotted a figure standing by the side of the road. A hitchhiker. Normally, I wouldn't pick up strangers, but something compelled me to slow down. Maybe it was the eerie stillness or the feeling that I was the only one on the road. I felt a mix of curiosity and concern. I pulled over, and the figure stepped into the light. It was a woman, her clothes tattered, and her hair disheveled. She looked cold, her face pale against the night. I hesitated for a moment, but she was shivering, and I couldn't just leave her there. "Need a ride?" I called out, trying to sound friendly. She nodded, and I opened the passenger door. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she climbed in. The moment she shut the door, the warmth of the car felt stark against the chill of the night. As I resumed driving, I glanced at her. Her eyes were wide and unfocused, darting around as if she was still processing where she was. "Where are you headed?" I asked, hoping to break the silence. "Anywhere," she replied, her voice shaky. "Just away from here." Her answer sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced at her again, trying to gauge if she was all right. "You okay?" I asked, feeling a mix of concern and unease. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared out the window, her expression distant. "I didn't think anyone would stop," she finally said, her voice tinged with relief. The tension in the air was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "What happened?" I pressed, feeling an urge to understand. I just needed to get away," she murmured. "From them. They were chasing me." My heart raced. "Who was chasing you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady, but my mind was already racing with scenarios. She turned to look at me, her eyes dark and hollow. "I don't know. They're everywhere. You can't see them, but they're always watching." A cold sweat trickled down my back. I wanted to laugh it off, to dismiss her as a scared woman caught up in her own head, but something in her tone made me hesitate. The way her gaze flickered nervously around the car made me acutely aware of the empty road ahead. "Are you sure you're all right?" I asked, trying to sound reassuring. "I just need to get away from here," she repeated, her voice firm but strained. "Please, just drive faster." I pushed down the rising fear and increased my speed. The headlights cut through the fog, but the shadows felt oppressive, almost alive. I glanced at her again. She was gripping the edge of her seat, her knuckles white. Suddenly, I spotted a figure standing by the side of the road ahead. My heart dropped as I recognized the silhouette. It looked like a man, his face hidden in the shadows. I couldn't help but slow down. "Please don't stop," she urged, panic flooding her voice. "Just keep driving." I hesitated, my foot hovering over the brake. "But trust me," she shouted, her eyes wide with terror. The urgency in her voice sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I pressed down on the gas, racing past the figure as my heart hammered in my chest. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the man turn to watch us go. "What was that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I don't know," she said, her breath coming in quick bursts. "But they'll find us if we stop." I drove faster, the fog thickening around us, obscuring everything beyond the reach of my headlights. Minutes felt like hours as we sped down the desolate road, the woman beside me growing more agitated with every passing second. "Just a little further," I told her, trying to reassure myself more than her. "We'll be out of here soon." Finally, I spotted the glow of lights in the distance, a gas station. Relief washed over me, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "Please don't stop," she pleaded again. "Just keep going." As I approached the station, I realized I couldn't ignore her fear. "I'll just stop for a second, all right? You can get out if you want." "No!" she cried. "You don't understand. They'll come for you, too." I pulled into the gas station lot, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. I turned to her, wanting to assure her that everything would be okay, but the words wouldn't come. The urgency in her voice, the wild look in her eyes, it terrified me. Before I could even open my mouth, she yanked the door open and bolted out of the car, disappearing into the shadows behind the station. My heart raced as I watched her go. I wanted to call after her to make sure she was okay, but a chilling dread filled the air. I sat there, frozen for what felt like an eternity. The stillness of the night felt heavier now. Just as I started to process what had happened, I noticed movement in the distance. Figures emerging from the fog, shadows that seemed to stretch and shift unnaturally. I slammed the car into gear and tore out of the lot, my pulse racing. I didn't look back, but I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on me, the uncertainty of what I had just witnessed haunting me. The road blurred ahead as I drove away, my mind racing with questions. Who was she? What were those figures? And what had I let into my car that night? I knew I'd never forget the hitchhiker, or the shadows that followed her into the darkness. I live in a pretty rural area of the state I live in. Nothing too far away from town, but definitely don't see anyone like you would in the city. So there normally isn't a whole lot of interaction except for the occasional wildlife showing their existence. I was home alone that night, getting ready to fall asleep, just laying in bed, winding down for the day. As the clock ticked past midnight, the house felt cozy and safe. I flipped through channels, half listening to the background noise, when I heard it, a faint sound like a soft thud. I paused, my heart skipping a beat. I told myself it was probably nothing, but my instincts whispered otherwise. I sat up and strained to listen. The sound came again, a dull thump followed by the rustle of something against the back door. I tried to dismiss it, but a creeping unease settled in my stomach. I grabbed my phone and glanced at the screen. No messages, no calls. Just me and my little bubble of warmth, alone. Then I heard it again, louder this time. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was definitely outside. I hesitated, debating whether to call the police or investigate myself. My curiosity got the better of me and I crept toward the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. As I reached the back door, I felt a chill run down my spine. I peered through the small window, my heart racing. The yard was blanketed in snow, glistening under the moonlight. Then I saw it. A shadow moving near the side of the house. Panic surged through me. I needed to make a decision. I could call for help, but what if they heard me? Instead, I moved quietly back to the living room and grabbed a heavy flashlight from the drawer. If someone was trying to break in, I'd be ready. I switched off all the lights, plunging the house into darkness, and carefully positioned myself by the window, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow grew closer, and I could see the outline of a figure moving stealthily toward the back door. Just then, I heard the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. My breath hitched. They were inside. I gripped the flashlight tightly, my knuckles white, as adrenaline coursed through me. The intruder's silhouette appeared in the doorway, half obscured by the darkness. I took a deep breath and flicked the flashlight on, pointing it directly at them. The bright beam cut through the shadows, illuminating a young man with wild eyes and a desperate expression. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice trembling but firm. He froze, surprise flashing across his face. I just need help," he stammered, his breath visible in the cold air. "Help? You break into my house at this hour and expect me to believe that?" I felt a mix of fear and anger. "I swear, please, I was being chased. I didn't know where else to go." His words rushed out, pleading and frantic. At that moment, something in his tone caught me off guard. I could see the panic in his eyes, but I also knew I had to protect myself. "Get out! I'm calling the police," I said, my voice stronger now. "Please, just let me explain." He took a step closer, but I held my ground, ready to swing the flashlight if necessary. I could hear sirens in the distance, a promise of safety drawing near. "You have 5 seconds to leave before I call the police," I warned, my heart racing. The intruder's eyes darted around, and I could see the conflict on his face. Finally, he backed away, raising his hands in surrender. "Fine, just let me go." He turned and bolted into the night. I quickly locked the door, my heart still pounding in my chest. As I dialed 911, the reality of what just happened began to sink in. The winter night was still cold and quiet, but now I felt a different kind of chill, a reminder of the fragility of safety. When the police arrived, I told them everything. They assured me they would patrol the area and keep an eye out for the intruder. As I finally sank back onto the couch, the blanket's warmth felt different now. Less like comfort, and more like a fragile shield against the cold outside world. What still bugs me to this day is that they never caught him, and I haven't seen him around either. I just hope he learned a lesson that night and straightened his ways, 'cause next time it might not go that well for him. This story still freaks me out when I tell it. I always felt a strange unease in my new house, like I was being watched. At night, I'd hear soft scratching noises from the walls, but I dismissed them as a new house settling. One evening, while settling in, I heard a whisper, faint but clear. "Help me." My heart raced. I raised out of bed and the voice came again, more urgent. Terrified, I grabbed a flashlight and began to explore. I found my way to the crawl space under the house. With shaking hands, I pried it open, revealing a dark space. I called out, "Is anyone there?" Silence, then a low chuckle. "You found me," it replied. I stumbled back, horrified. The scratching intensified as I ran. I slammed the panel shut, locking it away, and called the police. Once they arrived, they escorted out this tall, creepy, homeless-looking man and took him to jail. I pressed charges, and they assured me everything would be okay, until 2 weeks later. There was a note left on the panel reading, "I'm back." I changed the locks on all the doors and not sure what to do if I ever see him again. I was walking home alone from work 18F, my footsteps echoing on the empty streets. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows that danced as I moved. I noticed a figure trailing me from a distance, just a silhouette in the dim glow. I quickened my pace, but so did the figure. My heart raced. I glanced over my shoulder. The figure was closer now, still at a distance but definitely following. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. I took a few more turns, hoping to lose them, but the footsteps remained, steady and relentless. Finally, I reached my apartment building and hurried inside, slamming the door behind me. I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. The building was silent, but then I heard it, a faint knock on my door. Terror gripped me as I peered through the peephole. The figure was standing there, not looking at the door but at the peephole itself. I staggered back and called the police, but when they arrived, he was nowhere to be found. I still to this day don't know who that was, but I hope he never comes back.